What's going on? Pleasure to have you on the podcast.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Love it, dude. So back in 2013, you were working as a project manager, but you were building a relationship with Daisy creator Dean Hall, and I heard it was a special email that you sent. Tell us about that.
I'll tell you right now, I'm kind of impressed with the level of research. Usually, when I get into podcasts, I have to tell these stories. You've done your research ahead of time, so I get to cut ahead. This is nice. Um, so yeah, at the time, this would be the early to say mid 2013. Um, I had the fortuitous position of having been one of the three creators or you could say grandfathers of the modern battle royale genre with an IP that I later sold to Bohemia, known as Survivor Games. And at the time in 2013, we had kicked the event off in back in 2012, calling it Daisy Hunger Games, and we did a couple of those. Met up with Dean Hall in Seattle, obviously, PAX Prime, and I had myself, uh, Louis Doran, otherwise known as the official Lou, Jordan Tayer, otherwise known as Soma, who later on went to work for Twitch. I think now he currently works for Stream Elements. I always get some of those company names mixed up. He's gonna kill me for that. Um, yeah, so we had all made this event called Survivor Games, and we met up with Dean Hall at a Ruth's Chris Steakhouse outside of the convention center in downtown Seattle. He gave us the some of the best advice anyone's ever given me in my career, which is to stop using the name Hunger Games because you can't monetize that, and
Mm,
switch to something else. And I'm pretty confident he came up with the name Survivor Games. We had run that event throughout 2013, and I mean, honestly, it was like an avalanche of interest. It still to this day blew me away. I mean, 2012 and 2013 Twitch, we're talking, someone's pulling 400 viewers. It's like, oh my god, that's huge.
yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the people that as heavy hitters today probably weren't on Twitch at the point, and those that were, like Lyric, for example, or Summit, there was much smaller, much smaller. So it was a
Mhm.
much thinner ecosystem, and we started running these events, these Hunger Games, Survivor Games events throughout 2012 and 2013, and it was the chart on viewership just kept going up and up, and we weren't spending any money on marketing. This is purely word of mouth through content creators on Twitch coming together, kind of making this I don't know, this giant ball of viewer bases that all kind of have similar interests, but slightly different. You've got your Lyrics, you got your Puddins, you got Baby Night, you got Gold Glove, just all these people coming together over this love of the purely emergent gameplay that DayZ Mod offered, and putting them into this. I had watched the first Hunger Games film and watched the Battle Royale film, and we saw that and we're like, this is perfect for Daisy. Credit to Jordan Tayer Soma. It was 98% his idea. I just had to execute it. And yeah, so we're getting these huge spikes in viewership. Daisy itself ends up number one on Twitch every time we run this event, knocking out in some cases StarCraft 2 events, some Counter-Strike events. We were pulling huge numbers that even was catching Twitch off guard. We started talking to Ben Fishsticks, who now runs Juked. He was kind of our initial point of contact at Twitch. They were very impressed. Him and Marcus, DJ Wheat, they were all
Yeah.
blown away by the numbers we were pulling because we're literally just this little hobby project we're doing after work, and it's just skyrocketing on Twitch, straight to the number one spot. We were getting front page by them early on, which was a huge amount of support they gave us. And yeah, so we, in general, had a lot of attention from Dean, who's seen his little mod just blow up on Twitch by these events that were a complete repurposing of the tooling that they had used to make Daisy Mod. We switched things around a little bit, and we had a whole new experience, and people loved it. And my day job was more of a technical project manager over at what now would be called ID at Xbox. At the time, I think it was Managed Indie Games was the program title. And my office was in Studio C, and in that same building was Phil Spencer, was Chris Charla. I mean, it was Cherie Lutz. It was a whole who's who of getting things done on the Xbox side of
Yeah.
this. At the time, Chris Charla, his role was the portfolio manager for Microsoft Games. Well, I think it was Microsoft Studios at the time. Um, so I took this opportunity since I knew both people on both sides of the fence, and I knew that Bohemia and had these mutterings of maybe Daisy on Xbox, and I was intricately, plugged in with at the time the unreleased Xbox One. So I would send these emails to Dean saying, "All right, Dean. So here's the deal. Microsoft might seem like a behemoth of a machine to those on the outside, but on the inside, it's literally just normal people. They got kids, they got, hobbies. So if I can establish a human connection, then maybe the monolith that is Microsoft will become less intimidating or cumbersome or untrustworthy." Um, so yeah, I would send Dean these emails of like, these are the kind of things you can ask Microsoft for that they currently offer other studios that are publishing with them. And then I would go down and talk to Chris Charlin in his office and say, all right, I know you guys have been having trouble connecting with Bohemia. Here's what I know they're looking for. And the right things to say to them. And this kind of went back and forth for a couple months as we were working on launching the Xbox One. A
Sure.
and I tossed one of my last emails to Dean, I think it was right before he went off to climb Mount Everest, um, was, "I'm doing all this, you should just hire me." And I just kinda threw it out there like, "Yeah, roll the dice, maybe he'll think it's a joke," you know? And, his response to me, right before he goes and climbs a friggin' mountain is, "Oh, in a heartbeat." So, there's this back and forth as I'm trying to, catch him before he leaves, and we agree on, he asked me, "Can you come to LA for E3 this year?" Which would be summer 2013. So I went and I talked to my managers over in Redmond, and I said, "Listen, I've got this opportunity," and they were surprisingly supportive. Uh, I got advice from the senior producers I was working with that pretty much told me, and it's kind of a truism I've grown to know about the industry is if you've been somewhere long enough in the same role, people get to know you for that role, and it's hard for them to think of you in a different role. And often in the industry, in order to move up, you need to move out. You might come back to the studio later on, but you need to change
Mm,
studios to kind of reinvent yourself. It was a solid bit of advice. My GM at the time told me as long as I found people to cover the titles that I was the point of contact for, um, I could go, and even to the point of I had 2 titles I was the point of contact for that were showing on the show floor at E3, so they said, "This just makes sense. Let's send you with the Microsoft contingent. You'll be responsible for your titles down there. As long as you can take care of that, I don't care what you do as far as interviews and stuff like that." So, I flew out to Los Angeles, took care of the games I was responsible for on the show floor, getting them set up, ready for the big reveal of the Xbox One, the hands-on stuff. And in between, I went to a little interview with Mark Spaniel, the CEO, and Dean in this tiny booth in the middle of one of the halls. I don't remember which one. It was the only time I've known Bohemia Interactive to have an actual significant booth footprint. Normally, they're kind of off in the edge with the rest of like some of the smaller European studios, and they've got a couple machines. In this case, they had a whole chunk of the show floor. They set up all these demo machines. It was really cool to see. And I sat down, with them, and we talked about my experience in modding their titles and what we'd done with the Survivor games, my experience at Microsoft, and I was told by Marek, "Yeah, why don't you come out for a working interview?" And, again, credit to Microsoft, when I got back to Redmond and I told them they want me to fly out for a working interview, they didn't have a problem with that, and it's
oh,
likely because at the time, I had a role that was known as, internally in Microsoft, it's referred to as a V-dash. It's a full-time vendor.
mm,
What Microsoft does to fill a lot of positions is they'll go through contracting agencies, and they have an A dash and a V dash contracting agency. A dash is typically referred to as contractors, V dash is referred to as vendors. The difference, and this might have changed because it's been a long time since I've held
sure.
these roles, but it used to be that A Dash was a 12-month contract or up to a 12-month contract, and you had to have a 3-month gap at the end of that before you could take another contract. It had all something to do with Microsoft getting sued back in, I think, the early
Mhm.
2000s. And then the V Dash, the vendors, there was no limit at all. While you might technically work for a company like Siemens or something along those lines, you had a direct manager at Microsoft, an office at Microsoft. That's where you worked every day. Just Microsoft paid the contracting agency
Right.
paid you, and that's how they get around, benefits
Yeah,
effectively.
employee status and
Yeah,
all
yeah,
of
yeah.
those things probably.
So they gave me the time off as long as I had somebody to cover it. So I took unpaid 2-week unpaid vacation for a 2-week long working interview in a little village outside of Prague called Mishek. Tiny little village. Couldn't be a population of more than 1,500, I think, at the most. Eh
Wow.
Yeah, it was gorgeous. Up in the hills outside of Prague. Just absolute storybook, location. And I spent, 2 weeks staying in a little, kinda like a little hostel room above the motion capture facility at BI's offices in Meshek, working with Dean Hall and Matt Lightfoot, who now I think he's with Gunzilla. For a while there, he was with, Chris Roberts' company, the guys behind Star Citizen. Um, yeah, it was pretty much just the 3 of us, and then later on, we got, part-time access to some animators that later on became full-time part of the DayZ team. But it was very I mean, it was the room we were in is probably the quarter the size of my garage, all of us crammed in there. I remember I remember very the heating or the cooling was not very good, so we had to open the window to the forest out there to get some air circulation. We had a bunch of these little, electric fans. I have memories of us getting bored working on documentation and Dean Hall taking a bottle of Purell. Man, if he only knew how much that'd be valuable in 2020. Took a bottle of Purell and started spraying it into the fan to just cover the back of my head with hand sanitizer. We created something called a super match, where we took a whole box of matches and tied them all together and then put them on the end of this long wooden stick and then lit them to scare Matt Lightfoot. Unfortunately, the flame from that was so big that I saw it flash against the wall in front of me. A lot of hijinks as we kind of initially figured out what we wanted DayZ's early access launch to be. And then after the 2 weeks, I think I did a 5K run into the woods with Dean Hall, because at the time I ran a lot and Dean was training for Everest. And at the end of the run, we sat down, we talked about the results of the working interview. Then I went down and talked to Mark Spaniel, about my salary expectations, benefits, that kind of usual sort. And I had to sit on my hands for another 3 months until Slavomir Pavlicek, I believe his surname is, the CFO of Bohemia, came back from his vacation and signed off on my salary requirements because there was an agreement that Marek wouldn't spend money unless Slavak said yes. So I had to wait for him. It was a little tense the last 3 months at Microsoft as my managers kept saying, listen, we're here to support you, but we need to know if you're coming or going. But I
Yeah.
eventually, got the offer, took the offer, and I distinctly remember I worked very late my last night in Redmond. I was the last one out of the building, I'm pretty sure. It was pushing midnight, and we had in the lobby of Studio C, we had this big kind of hanging LED countdown. It was probably 3 stories high, and it had a countdown until the commercial launch of the Xbox One. And I remember when I left the building, it was 48 hours left on the clock. I got on my flight at 5 in the morning, flew directly to Prague. Well, not directly to Prague. It's Seattle to London, London to Prague. And I was at work the next morning. It was an absolute whirlwind. I
I
can
gotta
only
imagine.
I can only assume I was able to pull this off because I was still in my early 30s and my body was like, "No, you can totally operate on little to no sleep and jet lag and all these kind of things that would kick my ass now." But yeah, that was the impetus. I took that offer and immediately we started working on the product and building the team.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is so incredible, man. That's so incredible. when you launched a game on Steam, I heard that was wild as well. When you even accidentally deleted the game's live database?
So Daisy hit early access with effectively 3 months of development of anything resembling a normal team. Because prior to that, it was literally part-time offerings from some folks that were attached to Arma, and then 2 or 3 core people on it. And, after I moved out, we started building the team up, hiring people like, Peter Nespesny, who ended up becoming our lead designer, um, you know, uh Andre, I'm forgetting Andre's surname, Martin. There was a whole group of initial designers we hired, then we acquired, a lot of our core engineers, Fido and Raced and Yana, the whole core engine team came on board around that time, and we really started steamrolling towards this idea of what the minimum viable product was for Steam. And, the launch of that was quite hectic. I think I've still got somewhere around here. I'm a bit of a data hoarder, so if it's anything that's ever crossed my hard drive, ever been printed out, I'm storing it. I've got a
Yeah.
box somewhere in here of stuff about my career, and in there's just
Mm.
stacks of these invoices I had to submit, to get paid back on for team dinners for working super late in the night, ordering from TGI Fridays. Yes, TGI Fridays in Prague. Ordered from TGI Fridays. Lot of that, a lot of late night sessions working on the game, trying to get it ready to go. I remember launching, there was a lot of drama around that. Dean and I had worked pretty late into the night along with, gal I was dating at the time, good friend of mine now, content creator on Twitch, Kiwo. She was also there helping us work on the trailer, as well as Matt Lightfoot. Worked late into the night on this thing. It was definitely a passion project. Unfortunately, a after we had launched, there's a couple things here. One, no one had told us that we can't just click the button that says launch. Apparently, we need to talk to Valve, but there wasn't any software constraints on that. So we launched
Mm.
without giving Valve heads up that we were launching. And th- at the time, they didn't look over the media you upload to the storefront. So this trailer we worked on, it was our launch trailer. We hit go on it.
Yeah.
Dean was very excited. 15 minutes after launch, the trailer was removed. Dean was very angry about this. It
Yeah.
turns out, as I called Nathaniel Blue, our contact at Valve, they were a little uncomfortable with the fact that our trailer very clearly shows suicide as part of our gameplay loop, which it is. If you've
Mm.
ever played DayZ, it's been a while, but I'm pretty confident it was F11 was a shortcut to, shoot yourself, stab yourself in the neck, any kind of like, I hate this spawn, I'm gonna respawn.
Yeah.
We gave the players that option. Valve did not like that at all, at all. So they pulled the trailer. I had to deal with, at the time, Dean Hall having a bit of a diva moment where he's like, "I'm Dean Hall, for Christ's sake, they can't just do this to me." We ended up, I've still got the original trailer on one of these hard drives here. We ended up having to re-record the trailer and effectively, actually, we didn't re-record the trailer. We re-edited it, and instead of the particle effect coming out of the head and the player slumping over, we just cut to black after the
Mm.
gunshot goes off. They were happy with that. Now, fast forward a couple months after launch, we're making big waves. At the time, I believe we were one of the fastest to cross 1 million units in time wise. It was within our first 2 weeks. I think later on we were usurped by a couple 100,000 units, a little bit faster by PUBG years later.
Mhm.
But yeah, it was an insane year. 2014, we spent the entire year in the number one spot on Steam through every sale. We launched in the middle of the winter sale, and we still were number one without any takeovers, without any marketing. Daisy just took off 100% because of content creators and the word of
Yeah.
mouth. Because we literally had no marketing budget. I'm not being hyperbolic here. There was no marketing budget,
Wow.
and so it's a couple months later, we're obviously number 1 on Twitch. People are playing it, they're loving it. There's problems, sure, but it's taken off. And we had all been pulling very, very late nights. And anybody that works with relational databases is gonna put their face in their hands when they hear what I did. But we were still very much in this early development mindset, and I still was running queries on the database, what I thought was the development database located internally in the studio. I apparently was connected at the time to the live database. I was very tired. I didn't notice this. I think I had it pulled up because I was running a query on finding out exactly who our millionth user was,
Oh.
who had the millionth entry in the database. And I just completely forgot that I was on the live database. I, for some reason, and keep in mind, this is almost a decade ago, I I dropped all the tables on the live database. And dropping a table effectively means delete all. I deleted everything while the game was live. And while I believe, who was it? I think it was either Polygon or Eurogamer were in the studio doing a tour with Dean. I remember distinctly the setup. We were in the room that was kind of the designer office in this new building we had just moved to, which is currently where the DayZ development team is based off the Vltava River in Prague. And I was on this row of tables facing a wall, and Dean was right behind me with his desk facing that way. And I'm sitting in my chair and I'm looking at the screen, and my brain is kind of rebooting, realizing what I just did. As on my second monitor, I've got, it might have been Summit. Somebody I knew that was a big heavy hitter on Twitch was on this monitor, and I saw their character just rubber banding like crazy, and he couldn't open his inventory. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? And then I look over, like, oh, fuck. So I have this brief moment where it washes over me, there's just absolute fear. And I stop for a second, and I'm like, there's got to be a route out of this. So I opened Skype, because that's what we used back then. I opened Skype, and I go into this war room group chat we've got with Multiplay, who was our backend infrastructure provider. Multiplay later on got acquired by Unity, but I think they still operate as Multiplay. And I message Steve, who is their chief technical officer now, I believe. And I'm like, Steve, I did something very bad and I need you to save me. And he's like, okay, all right, calm down. What's wrong? And I said, I just dropped all tables on the live database. Do we have a backup? And he goes, well, you don't pay for a backup, but fortunately I was running some query optimizations and I have a backup from 15 minutes ago. And I'm like, okay, how long will it take you to restore this backup? And he's like, I can take down the back end, restore it, and bring it back up in 10 minutes. And I'm like, okay, let's do that. And I just sat there, not moving, staring at my desk like I was doing things, clicking on things, just waiting for the little notification on Skype that Steve was done. And as soon as Steve was done, then I was like, okay, now I tell Dean there's been a problem because it's been solved and he doesn't have to freak out about it. So I turned to him and I was like, Dean, I might have accidentally deleted the database, but it's okay. It's okay. Steve's got a backup. I am going to disconnect from the live database on my SQL editor. I'm going to remove that entry so I no longer have access. And he looks at me and goes, you learned a hard lesson today, didn't you? Like, yes, I did. All right, carry on. And that was the last time I made any connections to the live database for DayZ myself. I left it to the engineers from there on. Yeah, I briefly deleted every character in existence, which at that time I think there's a million users. I think we're around
Man.
84 million characters. I mean, because characters die often,
Sure. But I mean, when you have that many players and everything on and everything going, it's just like that must have been a long 10 minutes.
It
or
was
whatever it was. It's just like,
it was the longest 10 minutes of my life.
oh man.
Yeah.
Hey, I just want to take a little pause from the episode to tell you about an amazing opportunity that we have. Stone's going to share a little more details, but if you're interested in growing your stream, then listen to what he has to say.
Did you know there's a proven way to grow your stream? I get that growing your audience can feel impossible. I've been there, but I'm here to tell you that with the right framework, it's not only possible, I try and make it as simple as possible. I spent the last 10 years learning how to hone my craft, and I've distilled the most important things that I've learned into a 1 hour free live training session. I'm going to be talking about the most important things that you should be focusing on to create amazing content, grow your audience, and to monetize. You shouldn't be working hard and not seeing results. I want to save you from working on the stuff that isn't really moving the needle for you. There's a proven framework that every streamer uses to grow. It might be in different ways, but I'll even show you examples of how it's worked with many new creators. So, what's the secret? Stay tuned for the session. Find out. Spots are even limited. So make sure to save it now, and I hope to see you there. Just click the link in the episode description to register.
By sharing their stories.
Yeah. Yep. And being on the game development side, working with a lot of these creators as well, I guess creators around the world are always trying to figure out, how do I work with developers, especially with the games that I like, whether it's like the community side of it, the marketing side of it, or even the development side. To your point, giving feedback directly to developers and bringing people up as you did with DayZ. I mean, that's awesome. What advice would you give to creators along that front, or what was something that you see as being impactful in that?
Well, overall, unfortunately, not every developer in the industry sees the value from content creators. A lot of them nowadays do. I don't know. I found personally most of the larger budget offerings, your AAA studios trying to reach out to content creators, I found it disingenuous that they were more often than not dealing with folks in the marketing department or dealing with folks in communications, brand management, folks that were trained for curating and communicating through very controlled elements to a community. I always, and maybe this is just because I myself got into the industry from having more, not necessarily intimate, but closer contact to the developers that inspired me. I talked
Yeah.
about this briefly on social media after I think retweeting something Mike Bithell said. The the conversations that the developers are having about their products, that developers will have with other developers about their products, it's a level of insight and understanding that you just don't get through more curated means.
Mm.
I've always viewed video games as, and I'm going to steal a line from Richard Bartle here, who's a fantastic author and the most tenured game designer I'm aware of. He likes to refer to video games as art expressed through engineering. And I mean, I 100% agree. And having access to the artists and their motivations and what truly drives them and what they're aiming for, what their intent is with a given system, it was a level of understanding that I had always wanted for
Mhm.
the gaming community, for content creators. I felt like if you could connect with those people, if you could understand what they were aiming for, that together we could potentially make something greater. And I suppose my advice, and this might seem a little jaded, so forgive me for that. My advice to content creators looking to communicate, to integrate with developers in any fashion is, first and foremost, understand that game development, in my experience, is an it's an effort, it's a creative expression, it's an effort that takes passion and drive, and it is therefore very often near and dear to the hearts of the people that are doing it. So when you are talking about a product, when you're talking to a developer, please try and keep in mind that they are as passionate about and care for as much their product as you do for your own stream, for your community, for the stuff you're trying to create. So just the biggest advice I can have is have a little compassion and humanity when you're talking to another person, not a company, a person on
Mhm.
the other side of the thing. Because while companies might rake in the money from the sales, it is people that are creating this, people that are putting long hours in, driving their own creativity, trying to figure out how to achieve the goals. It's something they care about just as much as you care about your own. So if you can set aside what might be like, oh, that was a shit game, Summit punching his camera or whatever. You'd set aside those emotions and understand that the same passion you have for that title, they have for it. Find that common ground, speak to them with respect and any admiration you might have for the art in and of itself. I think you can better get to know the person behind it and you can make
Mm,
a far more constructive conversation. I, as a developer, am way more interested in constructive conversations with people that they might disagree with me, but it's very clear that they care about the product. Ultimately, that was a lot of the love hate about DayZ. It would be it'd come in waves, the admiration, condemnation, depending on the state of the build, how long the build's been out. It's a double-edged sword because I recognized at that time that these people wouldn't be angry on Reddit about something that changed if they didn't love the product. Now, if we
mhm.
can only take that passion and put it towards a more constructive form of conversation, which I will agree comes from both sides of the fence, then I think we can have a more collaborative effort. Because ultimately, while I and the teams that I work with might be creating these experiences and building these worlds, we're building it hoping to see content creators play it. Because while you can read the feedback that gets sent in through bug reports or through an article written somewhere, the most important data we can gather from people playing our games is to watch what they do rather than listen to what they say. Because often people will come up with ideas that ultimately they might not like when it gets adopted. But what they can't they can't hide or fib around or obfuscate in any way is how they actually play the game, what they actually hook into, what their actual emotional responses are in their face. I mean, that is the value from watching content creators as a developer. You can literally see, like you're in
Right.
some secret user research lab, you can literally see where they get frustrated and what really sinks into them, and
Mhm.
the value in that is immeasurable. And I don't know if I answered your question, but that is
Yeah,
100%
absolutely.
why I love watching content creators play my games because it tells me in the truest form whether or not I hit or missed on a given intent.
Yeah, and I mean, that's I think a lot of it in general is like it's an organic relationship, even like collaborating with other people, even with, a lot of other things. It's like, do you have that foundation? Clearly you had that going into, working with Dean and getting into DayZ. And like I think that helped bridges the gap in a lot of ways. And to see that example and to hear the story about that, I think is just phenomenal. I think we got time for like one more quick question
Sure,
here, but outside of work, I hear you are massively into Twitch role playing in terms of GTA. For those who are listening, maybe don't know, maybe you could just give us a little bit of what you're working on with that with the server and
sure.
like what that experience has been like for you.
Well, back in 2017, when I first started transitioning away from Bohemia Interactive and towards NXIL Entertainment, Brian Fargo's company, the Wasteland guys out here in Southern California. Um, my roommate, Lewis Doran, who I'd mentioned was part of the team that created the Survivor games. He was getting really into, along with another content creator I knew through Daisy, Jam Jar. They were getting into GTA RP. They were playing on this server called RP First, and effectively, what it is it's there's a group known as the CFX Collective who had written their own, lack of a better term, harness around Grand Theft Auto 5. It allowed
Okay.
them to effectively release a modding API that was super accessible with documentation. So people were spooling up these little worlds, kind of like in Daisy now, where you have like all these little mod packs. People were spooling up these worlds with their own little mod packs they'd written in Lua to create this virtual world. And that instantly grabbed me because I mean, I came from Ultima Online and Star Wars Galaxies, from Legend of the Red Dragon and Trade Wars 2002, I think it was, door games on BBSs. Like I've always been passionate about virtual worlds. It's exactly what got me working on Daisy for BI. And I saw this very rough little gem of this virtual contemporary world where you could live in in Los Angeles effectively. It was so accurate to the feeling of being in LA, and all these systems they were written around emergent gameplay, players taking the systems and doing something that they wanted with it and creating these stories in the same fashion that you saw people playing DayZ in 2012 and 2013 and onwards. I recognized it as I felt like this is the next thing in that evolution of content creators making stories and worlds through things like Twitch and YouTube and Facebook gaming and all that kind of stuff. Um, so I started diving in on this RP First server, which is run by a good friend of mine, who at the time went by Raging Ravage, now just goes by Ravage. And yeah, I just absolutely hooked me. I had this full-time job. I'd go down 2 miles from my house, and I'd be the creative director of this big team working on this big VR project. Then as soon as I got home, I was what was my character, I think, was like, I forgot his first name. His last name was May. Well, William May. I was William May, this LSPD rookie cop, and I'd drive around answering 911 calls, being this community-oriented police officer, and there was just constant new stuff going on everywhere. I'd run into folks that I hadn't seen in ages. All these names I recognized from DayZ, TVS, BOH, now known as Mike the Bard, Cream, Kenny, good old friend from my back when we streamed DayZ. You know, I'd run into these folks like, "Oh, I haven't seen this person in forever," and they'd be making these amazing in-depth stories with such a janky little harness that it was. I kept being addicted to it. I couldn't stop, and from 2017 to today, I have been habitually addicted outside of my work on continuing to develop, write my own systems, run servers, play in other communities, because I saw this CFX harness, whether it be now with Red Dead Redemption 2 and the Red M modding, or 5M, the GTA 5 modding. It was this perfect harness of this world building that was done by Rockstar, which is unparalleled world building.
Yeah.
And I can interpret it in any way I want. I can decide that, oh, you know what? I didn't feel like Rockstar did enough work on post-op, for example, which is one of the shipping companies in GTA. I can write this whole system where people can be a post-op driver, and they can drive the post-op trucks and drop off packages everywhere and get paid for it. And, oh, you know what? I can plug that into the traffic patterns of how the illegal jobs of, like, maybe growing cannabis or moving meth. Let's make sure it moves along the same pipelines, the same route, so that these players are overlapping. I was effectively being able to continue what I wanted to do with DayZ on someone else's code base, on someone else's time, and not have to worry about whether or not BI liked a change, or whether or not I had to
Sure.
wait to push out an update. I could just do it whenever I wanted to. It was immediate feedback on the ideas I had, because it was so easy to write something in Lua and push it out there and see how it worked. And to this day, I'm still addicted to it. I ended up focusing, right around the time that COVID happened. I was starting to focus on Red M, the Red Dead Redemption 2 harness that those CFX guys put out. So I started
Mhm.
working on that and building up a Red Dead Redemption 2 roleplay server. The idea of being, a cowboy or a U.S. Marshal or a bandit
Yeah.
out in the Wild West, right? It was huge. It was awesome, the stuff we could do with, and it was an evolution already of the code base that Rockstar had worked on with GTA 5. They had taken it so much further with Red Dead. I was able to dedicate time on that with a good friend of mine, Arik from Texas. We built up this pretty cool world that started hitting on some of the stuff that I left on the table with DayZ. The idea of use-based skill systems and skill caps, and a player-driven economy.
Yeah.
And that thing started snowballing and ended up gathering attention of my good friend Ravage, who I hadn't played with since I had left RP First years back. And we ended up merging our communities together, taking my PRC server, which is a domain name, 6-letter domain name I had had from the 90s in Ultima Online, merge that into his Twitch RP, and we've got now a really solid base of the Twitch RP GTA launch that just relaunched now. So we got that going, and we're working on an update for the Red Dead server. We're going to relaunch both of those with stronger player economies and player skills, and overall, it's it's everything I ever dreamed as a game developer. Being able to just, carte blanche, prototype stuff, push it out there, make quick changes, get immediate feedback because
Yeah.
so many people are streaming it. I mean, if I could get paid full time for doing that, I'd probably just do that.
I mean, it sounds like you're super passionate about it. That's freaking awesome. Thank you so much for joining on. If anybody wanted to like getting even involved with that or wanted to hear more, about some of the stuff you're working on, what's the best place to go, even to get started or even to just chat with you or to see where you're posted online?
Well, for me, easiest would probably be my Twitter account, which is twitter.com/Hicks_206. There's probably still a good amount of impersonators out there, so just look for the blue check mark one. That's me. On the GTA and Red Dead Redemption side, twitchrp.com should have everything you need to know. We're trying to centralize all our information on the development of the Red Dead relaunch and the GTA relaunch, all there. So yeah, between my Twitter and twitchrp.com, you should get all the information you need.
Awesome, man. I feel like I could talk to you for another 3 hours easy with the amount of questions that I have, but we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for joining in and sharing some of your experience and everything today, man.
It was a pleasure.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. I wanted to just end this with a little bit of context on why we do what we do. We're former content creators ourselves, and we just really want to help as many content creators as we can. That's why we started Pipeline.gg. It's a platform where you can find other like-minded creators and learn from the pros who've already been there. Get step-by-step guidance so you can avoid all the mistakes that we made in the beginning. If you love the episode, there's going to be even more inside of Pipeline. So check it out. Head over to Pipeline.gg.